The impossible seemed like a reasonable request to George Patton. Winter meant nothing to him. Snow was just another obstacle to crush. When German commanders celebrated their surprise breakthrough in the Ardennes, they believed American forces would collapse. They counted on blizzards to protect their flanks. They trusted frozen roads would slow any counterattack. They were wrong about everything. Most fatally, they were wrong about the man who would destroy them. December 1944 brought Europe its harshest winter in decades. Ice covered every road. Snow buried entire villages. Temperatures dropped so low that rifle bolts froze solid. Any sensible military commander would wait for spring. Any rational general would consolidate defenses and pray for better weather. George Patton was neither sensible nor rational. He was something far more dangerous. The crisis began before dawn on December 16th. German artillery shattered the morning silence across 80 miles of front. Shell bursts lit the dark forest like deadly fireworks. 3 entire German armies erupted from concealment. 250,000 soldiers, 1,000 tanks, all aimed at one target: split the Allied forces in half, drive to Antwerp, force America and Britain to negotiate. Hitler's final gamble was underway. American units crumbled under the assault. Some divisions simply vanished. Others fled westward in complete panic. Within hours, German panzers rolled through villages that had been safe since liberation. Tank treads crushed frozen ground that hadn't seen combat since 1940. The breakthrough created a bulge in Allied lines that stretched deeper each hour. Reports flooded into headquarters. Enemy forces advancing 20 miles, 30 miles, 40 miles. Panic spread faster than the German advance. Supply dumps were abandoned, headquarters packed for evacuation. Some officers spoke openly of retreat to the Rhine River. Allied intelligence had failed completely. Months of aerial reconnaissance revealed nothing. Radio intercepts caught no warnings. The enemy had moved only at night, maintained perfect radio silence, achieved total surprise. American soldiers who thought the war was nearly over suddenly found themselves surrounded, cut off, fighting for their lives in frozen foxholes. The weather made everything worse. Blizzards grounded Allied aircraft. Ice made roads impassable. Snow drifts buried supply trucks. German commanders smiled as they studied their maps. Winter was their ally. Time was on their side. American forces would freeze before they could organize effective resistance. They had forgotten about George Smith Patton, Jr. Born into military tradition in 1885, Patton had spent 59 years preparing for this moment. Every battle he'd studied, every campaign he'd analyzed, every sleepless night planning hypothetical operations. All of it led to one crucial meeting in the fortress town of Verdun. Eisenhower sat at the head of a scarred wooden table. His face showed the strain of command. Dark circles under his eyes. Worry lines deeper than usual. Around him gathered the finest military minds in the Allied forces. Bradley looked exhausted. Montgomery appeared concerned. Other commanders shuffled papers nervously. The situation was deteriorating by the hour. German spearheads drove toward crucial objectives. Bastogne was surrounded. Supply lines were threatened. If Antwerp fell, the war could drag on for years. If Allied forces split apart, Nazi Germany might actually negotiate a separate peace. Eisenhower asked for solutions. The room fell silent. No one had answers. The enemy held all the advantages. Then Patton stood up. His voice cut through the gloom like a blade. Clear, confident, absolutely certain. He could wheel his Third Army north within 48 hours. 6 full divisions, complete with armor and artillery, ready to attack the German flank. The other commanders stared in disbelief. Turn an entire army 90 degrees? In the middle of winter? During a blizzard? While disengaging from active combat? It sounded like complete madness. Military textbooks called such maneuvers impossible. Logic suggested waiting for spring. But Patton had never trusted textbooks. He'd built his reputation on doing what others thought impossible. His confidence wasn't based on wishful thinking. While other commanders reacted in shock to German moves, Patton had been preparing for weeks. His intelligence staff detected unusual enemy activity in early December. Strange movements, suspicious radio traffic, fuel dumps appearing near quiet sectors. Most commanders dismissed these reports. The Germans were finished. Their army was broken. They couldn't possibly mount a major offensive. Patton disagreed. He'd ordered his staff to prepare contingency plans, 3 different scenarios for rapid redeployment north. When the crisis broke, he was already 3 steps ahead. His supply officers knew which roads to use. His tank commanders understood the routes. His artillery knew the timing. At Verdun, Eisenhower pressed for details. How quickly could the movement begin? What forces would be available? Could momentum be maintained? Patton's answers were immediate and precise. 3 divisions in 48 hours. Full attack in 72 hours. Complete confidence in success. The room buzzed with arguments. Other generals called it reckless. Staff officers calculated impossible logistics. Weather reports predicted worse storms ahead. Patton listened to every objection. Then he repeated his promise. 48 hours. His philosophy was elegantly simple. Attack always. Speed over caution. Audacity over prudence. Strike where the enemy expects safety. The Germans had overextended themselves, pursuing their breakthrough. Their supply lines stretched thin. Their flanks lay exposed. They carried fuel for only 6 days of operations. Any delay would allow them to consolidate gains. Any hesitation would give them time to dig in. Only immediate action could shatter their momentum. Eisenhower made his decision. He authorized Patton's plan. The most ambitious military maneuver of the entire war was about to begin. Patton used a simple code phrase to alert his staff. Play ball. Those 2 words triggered a cascade of orders across eastern France. Tank crews started engines. Supply officers loaded trucks. Infantry units packed equipment. Within hours, one of history's greatest armies was in motion. The race against time had begun. Night fell over France like a frozen blanket. Temperature dropped below 0. Wind howled across empty fields. Snow fell so thick it buried road signs. Into this nightmare marched Patton's Third Army, 133,000 vehicles, 6 complete divisions, over 100 miles to cover. The conditions defied description. Europe suffered through its worst winter in living memory. Ice coated every surface. Engines froze solid, unless restarted every 30 minutes. American soldiers lacked proper winter gear. Thin jackets, cotton uniforms, boots that let in snow and water. Many wrapped newspapers around their feet for insulation. Fingers cracked from cold. Faces turned blue from wind. Men lit fires in their helmets just to warm their hands enough to hold weapons. Truck drivers peered through windshields frosted white. Tank crews sealed themselves inside steel boxes that became freezing coffins. Artillery crews worked with mittens so thick they could barely load shells. Yet the columns kept moving, mile after frozen mile, hour after bitter hour, step by agonizing step northward. German intelligence couldn't believe the reports. American units moving at full speed through blizzards? Impossible. Their army was too soft, too dependent on comfort. Wehrmacht generals remembered Russia. They knew how winter destroyed armies. Even their own forces had been crippled by cold during the retreat from Moscow. Modern mechanized units simply couldn't function in such conditions. Fuel froze, engines seized, men died of exposure. Movement became impossible. They were wrong about everything, especially about American determination. Patton refused to command from safety. He rode in an open jeep through howling wind, his face red from cold, his eyes watering from ice crystals. Soldiers saw him everywhere, at crossroads, in supply depots, along marching columns. His presence became a weapon more powerful than any tank. "Old blood and guts," they whispered. If Georgie could endure the cold, so could they. If their general shared their suffering, they could accomplish miracles. His philosophy spread through the ranks. Every officer understood the mission. Keep moving. Never stop. Attack at dawn. Supply officers performed miracles of logistics. Fuel trucks followed tank columns. Ammunition convoys raced through night storms. Medical units leapfrogged forward to support advancing infantry. 62,000 tons of supplies rolled north on wheels and treads. Food for the hungry. Bullets for the rifles. Shells for the artillery. German commanders watched their secure flanks suddenly threatened. Bridges they'd ignored became crucial targets. Roads they'd forgotten filled with enemy armor. General von Brandenburger admitted later he'd never witnessed such speed under impossible conditions. American forces moved faster through blizzards than his own army moved in good weather. By December 21st, Patton's trap was closing. His 4th Armored Division led the charge. Behind them rolled the 80th Infantry. The 26th Infantry secured flanks. All 3 divisions aimed at one target: Bastogne, the crossroads town where American paratroopers held against impossible odds. The relief of Bastogne would prove Patton's genius. His 48-hour promise would become legend. His winter gamble would break Hitler's last hope. Snow continued falling, but now it covered advancing American armor instead of retreating American infantry. The tide had turned. Bastogne squatted like a medieval fortress in the Belgian countryside. Narrow streets, stone buildings, church spires rising above tile roofs. Inside those ancient walls, the 101st Airborne Division faced annihilation. Surrounded since December 20th, running low on ammunition, short of medical supplies. German artillery pounded the town around the clock. Shells crashed into houses. Mortars burst in squares. Sniper bullets whined down empty streets. American paratroopers huddled in basements and foxholes. Their breath formed clouds in the freezing air. Ice formed on their rifles. Wounded men died from cold as much as from bullets. On December 22nd, German officers approached under a white flag. They carried surrender terms, honorable capitulation, safe treatment for prisoners. The demand reached Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe. His response became instant legend. One word that defined American determination: nuts. That single syllable echoed around the world. American soldiers weren't surrendering. They'd fight to the last bullet, die in the last foxhole, never give up. But defiance alone couldn't hold forever. The 101st needed relief. They needed it fast. They needed a miracle. The miracle had a name: George Patton. December 22nd brought the sound of distant artillery, different from German guns, heavier, more concentrated, coming from the south. Patton had unleashed his counterattack exactly on schedule. 3 divisions, hundreds of tanks, thousands of infantry, all driving north through the storm. The weather that had protected German flanks now concealed American movement. Snow clouds hid advancing armor. Blizzards masked the sound of engines. 4th Armored Division led the assault. Sherman tanks grinding through drifts. Tank destroyers following in support. Infantry clinging to any vehicle that moved. Fighting was savage from the first contact. German panzers emerged from forest shadows. Tigers and panthers with thick armor and deadly guns. Steel clashed against steel in duels fought at point-blank range. Sherman crews knew their tanks were outgunned. They compensated with speed and numbers. Tank after tank exploded in orange fireballs. Crews burned alive inside metal coffins. Others escaped to fight again. The advance never stopped. Infantry struggled through snow that reached their waists. Machine gun nests had to be destroyed by hand. Artillery positions overrun with bayonets. Men fell and died in drifts that would hide their bodies until spring. Others pressed forward over the frozen corpses of friends and enemies alike. Each mile cost dozens of lives. Each hill demanded its price in blood. Each village required its sacrifice of young men who would never see home again. But the advance continued. 7 miles on the first day, 5 miles on the second. Progress measured in yards, but gained with determination. Patton prayed for clear skies. His chaplain had written a special prayer for fair weather. Copies were distributed to every unit. Soldiers read it by candlelight in frozen foxholes. December 23rd brought the answer. Clouds broke. Sun pierced through for the first time in days. The sky cleared like a gift from heaven. Then came the roar. Allied aircraft returning to battle. Hundreds of fighters and bombers. P-47 Thunderbolts diving like hawks on prey. German supply columns exploded under machine gun fire. Tank formations scattered before rocket attacks. Artillery positions vanished in bomb craters. The battlefield shook with thunder and lightning. But this storm came from American engines. This destruction fell on German heads. Patton's men used the air support to accelerate their advance. Tank crews coordinated with pilots overhead. Infantry called in strikes on stubborn positions. Day by day, the distance to Bastogne shrank. German resistance stiffened as the threat became clear. Counterattacks crashed against American spearheads. Elite SS divisions threw everything they had at the advancing Americans. Some of Germany's finest soldiers, best equipment, most experienced commanders. The battles were fought yard by yard, house by house, street by street. Neither side asked for quarter. Neither side offered mercy. Christmas passed almost unnoticed. Men too exhausted to celebrate, too cold to sing carols, too busy killing and dying to remember peace on earth. December 26th became the day of miracle. Lieutenant Charles Boggess led his Sherman tanks into the southern edge of Bastogne. His radio crackled with reports of enemy resistance. Then suddenly, the resistance collapsed. German defenders fled or surrendered. Tank treads rolled over cobblestone streets. The siege was broken. Paratroopers of the 101st Airborne emerged from their holes like ghosts, bearded, hollow-eyed, grinning despite their wounds. The link was made. Bastogne was free. Patton's promise was fulfilled. What had seemed impossible at Verdun now stood revealed as inevitable. Cheers echoed through streets that had known only the sound of gunfire. Tank crews embraced paratroopers. Supply trucks rolled in with food and ammunition. The German bulge had reached its maximum extent. From this moment, Hitler's offensive would only retreat. The last great gamble was failing. But the Battle of the Bulge was far from over. 6 more weeks of fighting lay ahead. 6 weeks of blood and ice and death. The relief of Bastogne was just the beginning. Patton's forces had broken the German advance. Now they had to destroy it completely. Winter became the graveyard of Hitler's ambitions. For 6 more weeks, the Ardennes echoed with artillery and tank fire. Villages changed hands multiple times. Forests became killing fields. American and German soldiers fought hand-to-hand in towns buried under snow. Every building became a fortress. Every crossroads a battlefield. The cold remained merciless. Foxholes carved from frozen earth became graves for men who died of exposure. Weapons jammed from frost. Medical supplies froze solid. Wounded soldiers faced double enemies: German bullets and winter weather. Many died from cold before medics could reach them. Yet Patton's Third Army pressed the attack relentlessly. From the south, his divisions hammered at the base of the German salient. Each day the noose tightened. Montgomery's forces struck from the north. British and Canadian units drove toward the advancing Americans. The German bulge began shrinking from both directions. Hitler had committed his final reserves to the Ardennes offensive. SS Panzer divisions, elite paratroopers, his best remaining tanks and aircraft. All were being destroyed in the frozen forests of Belgium. Fuel shortages crippled German mobility. Supply lines collapsed under Allied air attacks. Teenagers and old men fought alongside battle-hardened veterans. Germany was scraping the bottom of its manpower barrel. Victory had become impossible. By early January, German forces were in full retreat. Abandoned equipment littered the roads. Tank crews fled on foot through snow-covered woods. Allied air power returned with devastating effect. Clear skies brought swarms of fighters and bombers. German columns were slaughtered from above. Still, the battle continued. Hill by hill. Tree by tree. Each piece of ground paid for in blood and suffering. At Houffalize, American forces from north and south finally met. The German bulge was eliminated. Hitler's gamble had failed completely. The price was staggering on both sides. Germany lost over 100,000 men killed, wounded, or captured. More than 700 tanks destroyed. 1,600 aircraft shot down. American casualties were equally severe. 19,000 dead. Over 60,000 wounded or missing. Entire units wiped out in fighting that resembled the worst battles of World War I. The Ardennes countryside was scarred forever. Shell craters pocked every field. Burned-out vehicles dotted the landscape. Villages lay in ruins. Snow that had fallen pure and white was now stained red with blood. Frozen corpses would be discovered for months after the fighting ended. But from that crucible of suffering emerged a clear truth. German military power was finally broken. Never again would the Wehrmacht mount a major offensive. The Reich had bled itself white in the Belgian forests. Its last reserves were gone. Its best equipment destroyed. Its most experienced soldiers dead or captured. Germany's defeat was now only a matter of time. The question was no longer if, but when Nazi resistance would collapse completely. At the center of this victory stood George Patton, the man who had turned impossible into inevitable, the general who made winter warfare his weapon. His tactical brilliance was proven beyond doubt, moving 6 divisions 90 degrees in 48 hours, maintaining coordination through blizzards, striking the enemy at his weakest point. German commanders who had mocked American softness now spoke of Patton with genuine fear. They recognized in him their own aggressive spirit turned against them. Winston Churchill called the Ardennes undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war. High praise from a man sparing with compliments. For Patton personally, it was complete vindication. A lifetime of preparation had led to this moment. Every book he'd read, every map he'd studied, every battle he'd analyzed. The slapping incidents that nearly ended his career were forgotten. His absence from D-Day was forgiven. His reputation was restored and enhanced. He had proven that audacity and careful preparation could overcome any obstacle. That leadership and determination could inspire ordinary soldiers to achieve miracles. The Germans had laughed when their offensive began. They were certain winter would protect them. They believed American forces would crumble in the cold. Their laughter died in the snow-covered forests of Belgium. Their confidence froze in the bitter wind. Their hopes were buried under American artillery shells. The Battle of the Bulge became more than military victory. It demonstrated American character under ultimate pressure. When defeat seemed certain, courage prevailed. When chaos descended and the world seemed to shatter, leadership made the difference. One man's certainty became an army's strength. One general's audacity became a nation's triumph. The legacy lives on in every military academy, in every officer's training, in every reminder that even in the darkest winter, victory remains possible for those bold enough to seize it. Snow melted and spring returned to the Ardennes, but the memory remained frozen forever. The memory of impossible made real by American determination and one extraordinary general's unshakable will.